when we got in, there was a little bit of a snafu with his credential or getting him in, And so my boss Wally is kind of talking to the guy at the credential at the ticket office or whatever at the window, and Willie Mays is kind of getting a little impatient. He says, Wally, tell him who I am, Wally. Tell him who I am. It was like this is my ID. That was Willie Mays.
Tell me about when you got to meet Willie Mays in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah, it wasn't a journalism-related story, kind of. I don't recall it. But anyway, in 1983, Willie Mays was working for a casino. In fact, he and Mickey Mantle were both kind of banned from baseball for a while by Bowie Kuhn because they were associated with casinos. They were like public relations guys, which is really interesting now in perspective now when you see how baseball and sports has embraced gambling. But they were literally two of the best players in the game were literally banned from baseball because they were involved with casinos. So anyway, Willie Mays was doing some publicity, and he was working for Bally, and one of the honchos at Bally was a former Arkansas guy who my sports editor, Wally Hall, knew. And so he arranged for Willie Mays to come into Little Rock to do some promotion for something. I can't remember. There was a press conference. I remember what it was. But anyway, he brought Willie Mays in, and he came into the newsroom at the Arkansas Democrat because I guess through the connection with my boss. And all of us got to meet Willie Mays. One of the guys got an autographed baseball. There's a picture. I saw a picture recently. I think Wally sent it to me after Willie Mays passed away last year. And I got to find that picture of me, 24-year-old me in the background with Willie Mays and a bunch of other guys in our newsroom. But anyway, the Razorbacks, Arkansas used to play in Fayetteville, but every so often they would play a few games in Little Rock, because of the fan base. So there was a football game, Arkansas was playing, I can't remember who it was, but anyway, Willie Mays wanted to go to the football game. And I think that's where they had the press conference. So he's in the newsroom. So it turns out Wally put me in charge of driving to the game, okay? So, and let me just back up a little bit here. This is 1983, and I'm 24 years old. And Willie Mays, at the time, baseball players at the time, like guys like Willie Mays, were mythical, larger-than-life people. It's not like today where you see, because you never saw them. Even if you lived in a city where you could see them play, you rarely saw them play. So you only heard about them or read about them. And so he was so much bigger. I mean, maybe not better, but he was so much bigger than like Shohei Ohtani or Mike Trout or any of the great players you see today in the minds of a 24-year-old because of it. So I'm driving Willie Mays, this, like I said, mythical guy, a Hall of Famer, to a game. And I just remember being so nervous. I'm in my 1981 Buick Regal driving down Markham Street in Little Rock to this game, and I am so nervous that I am mistiming all the traffic lights. Like I stopped at a red light. I mean, I went through a red light. I remember that, and then I got so nervous I overcompensated and I stopped at a yellow light. I mean, I thought Willie Mays I thought he was going to tell me to stop the car and take a cab. I was just overcome with just nervousness. So anyway, we finally got there. We made it to War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock to the game. And the one thing I remember about that incident was I thought was kind of cool was when we got in, there was a little bit of a snafu with his credential or getting him in, And so my boss Wally is kind of talking to the guy at the credential at the ticket office or whatever at the window, and Willie Mays is kind of getting a little impatient. He says, Wally, tell him who I am, Wally. Tell him who I am. It was like this is my ID. That was Willie Mays, and it wasn't in like it wasn't like he was over trying to get ahead of somebody in a restaurant or something. He knew he was Willie Mays, and I love that about celebrities. I know, Paul McCartney I've seen things on Paul McCartney is like that. Arnold Palmer was like that. They knew who they were, and so they didn't, So hey, I'm Willie Mays. Can you let me in? Can we get in? And so I thought that was a really cool thing about that. And yeah, that was just. I just remember just being so. It's funny when you look back at it 40 years ago, just the timing of it. Having the great Willie Mays, I never wanted to. I said I'll never wash this seat again. He was in a bucket seat right next to me in my car. It was just I was such a nervous kid at the time. It was like I was 24, but it was like I was 14.
If we didn't do this second part two, if you will, people would be wondering. Wait a second, you talked to Mark Potash about being in Little Rock, Arkansas. You talked about Arkansas. Didn't he overlap with one of the greatest athletes to ever come out of Arkansas, Scottie Pippen? And you kind of did in a sense.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest disappointments. Yeah.
Well, tell the story. Tell the story for
Okay,
our
well, yeah,
listeners.
that's one of my big disappointments. Is I grew up in Chicago reading like Taylor Bell, covering high schools in the Sun Times, and Taylor was always when he was at the Daily News, he was at the Daily News at the time when I was in high school, but then later in the Sun, and he was always big on college prospects and how good these guys are. He was very aggressive in doing that, and so I wanted to kind of do that in Arkansas. I was a high school sports editor in 1982. And so I wanted to do a story on all the top prospects in Arkansas in high school basketball. And I did a story, so I kind of researched it, and I did a story on the top sophomores, the top juniors, and top seniors. So the story runs on these three stories run on all these players. And after the story ran, the coaches at the University of Arkansas Little Rock, a couple guys I knew fairly well, Ron Kestenbaum and Forbes Lapp, they come up to me and they were like chiding me, like, "Oh man, you missed this kid in Hamburg. We got this kid in Hamburg, Arkansas. You totally missed him, And they're, I felt kind of bad about it and stuff like that. And they were, and in a way, they were right. Because the player that they were talking about, his name was Myron Jackson, and he was a senior at Hamburg, and he was a true sleeper. He was a guy nobody knew about. He ended up starting 3 years at Arkansas Little Rock. He got drafted. He actually played 8 games in the NBA. I mean, a total sleeper. But the joke was on them because what they didn't realize is that while they were scouting scouting Myron Jackson, he had a teammate on his team, Scott Pippen was his name, and so I did all that. The big as it turns out, the greatest sleeper of all, they found a sleeper, but they also missed I think arguably, not even arguably, the greatest sleeper of all time, a guy who literally walked on at an NAIA school and then turned out to be a Hall of Famer. And so that's a big disappointment for me, frankly, because I was just very lax. I mean, not that I might not have found Scottie Pippen, to tell you the truth. Might have found Myron Jackson. Scottie Pippen was 6'1" in high school. He was 6'4" when he got to UCA as a walk-on. Not even a walk-on. He was a team manager. And by his sophomore year, he was 6'7". So that he kind of snuck up on everybody. But overall, that story was a disappointment to me because I didn't research it. I pride myself now, now that I'm older, on my research. And I was very lax, did not cover every team, did not do a good job on that. And so, I kind of feel like, I missed Scottie Pippen. So that was, I have to admit that was kind of a disappointment. But I'd seen Michael Jordan play and when he was in high school at the McDonald's All-American game in '81. So I did see him in high school, but did not get to see Scottie Pippen. And that was a little bit of a disappointment.